They say every neighborhood has that one guy who takes the HOA more seriously than anyone else. But Maple Court didn't just have a guy. We had Doyle Mason. Now, Doyle wasn't an elected board member. He wasn't appointed by anyone. He wasn't even asked to help out. He just decided, one day, that he was the official HOA patrol. Clipboard under one arm, smartphone glued to the other hand, he strutted up and down the street like he carried a badge. He snapped photos of lawns, fences, garbage bins, and even people's flower beds, uploading his evidence to the neighborhood app like he was a one-man code enforcement squad. At first, most of us ignored him. After all, every neighborhood has a busybody, right? But Doyle didn't just peek over fences, he climbed them. It was 5:30 one morning when I heard it myself, the metallic creak of our backyard fence. I was half awake, pouring cereal at the kitchen counter, when Grandpa, who was already on the porch with his rocker and black coffee, muttered without even looking up, "There he goes again." Sure enough, Doyle was scaling our fence like some wannabe cat burglar. Phone in hand, he crouched over Grandpa's tomato plants, snapping photo after photo like he'd just discovered a crime scene. Apparently, a 75-year-old veteran. Growing a few tomatoes for his own kitchen was, according to Doyle, a violation of community aesthetics. Can you imagine? Tomatoes, a crime against the neighborhood. I nearly dropped my spoon right there. I wanted to storm outside and tear into him, but Grandpa simply raised his hand without moving his eyes from Doyle. "Patience," he whispered. "Let a fool show himself long enough, and he'll write his own ending." That was Grandpa's way.com/measured. Steady, the opposite of Doyle's manic energy. And this wasn't even the first time. Twice before, we'd caught him lurking near our shed. One evening, Grandpa swore he even saw Doyle rattling the lock, like he expected to find contraband hidden inside. Grandpa reported him, of course. But when he brought it up to the HOA president, Linda Clay, she brushed it off with that fake smile she always wore. "Oh, Doyle's just enthusiastic," she said. "He really cares about the neighborhood." Enthusiastic. That was her word for it. Doyle was breaking state trespassing law under North Carolina Statute 14-159.13. But somehow Linda spun it into passion for the community. Grandpa didn't buy it. He never did. And when the sheriff's office told us it was a gray area, unless Doyle was caught red-handed, Grandpa leaned back in his rocker, sipped his coffee, and smiled a smile that meant only one thing. He had a plan. Grandpa wasn't the type to shout or threaten. His way was quieter, sharper, like a chess player who always saw 3 moves ahead. The morning Doyle climbed our fence to photograph the tomato plants, Grandpa didn't yell. He just rocked in his chair, sipping coffee, and by the time Doyle vanished down the block, Grandpa was already sketching something on a notepad. By the end of that week, we had a brand new addition to our backyard, a custom iron gate, taller than the fence, solid enough to stop a bull. Doyle, naturally, noticed it on his next patrol. He strutted past, squinting at the steel bars, probably already composing a complaint to Linda about how it clashed with neighborhood aesthetics. But what Doyle didn't know was this. Grandpa had wired the gate. Not dangerously. Grandpa wasn't out to kill anyone, but enough voltage to make a grown man think twice about touching what didn't belong to him. A deterrent. I'll never forget the night Doyle discovered that little upgrade. It was 11:15 p.m. I'd just turned off the porch light when I heard the metallic clink of someone jiggling the gate latch. Seconds later, ZZZAP. A muffled yelp split the quiet street. Then a string of curses whispered loud enough to wake the crickets. From my bedroom window, I could see Doyle hopping backward, clutching his hand like a cartoon burglar caught in the act. Grandpa.com, as ever, simply opened the front door and called out, "Careful, Doyle. Some fences bite back." The next morning, Doyle filed a complaint with the HOA claiming our illegal gate was endangering the safety of residents. Linda called an emergency meeting. But the thing about Grandpa, he came prepared. He walked into that meeting with a folder full of paperwork, permits for the gate, city approval, and a state statute printed in bold that allowed electrified deterrence on private property as long as they met safety guidelines. Linda's smile flickered when she saw the documents. She tried to spin. It said Grandpa was being unneighborly, but the room wasn't buying it. Half the homeowners were secretly tired of Doyle's patrols anyway. Still, Doyle wasn't finished. He muttered something about not being intimidated, and stormed out of the meeting like he'd just been personally wronged by the Constitution. Grandpa, though, he just leaned back in his chair and said the same thing he always did. Let a fool keep walking. Eventually, he trips over his own feet. Summer rolled in, and with it, new HOA drama. Grandpa had just finished cleaning out our pool when Doyle appeared again, this time with a beach towel slung over his shoulder. You read that right. The man who spent months photographing tomato plants and rattling shed locks decided our private pool was apparently community property. He didn't even knock. He just strolled right through the side gate one afternoon while Grandpa and I were grilling burgers. Doyle dropped his towel on a chair, kicked off his shoes, and announced, since this is an HOA-regulated neighborhood, technically, the pool falls under shared use. I nearly choked on my soda. Grandpa set down his spatula slowly, like a sheriff about to lay down the law. Doyle, he said, voice steady, step into that water, and you'll regret it. But Doyle didn't listen. He marched straight to the pool, chest puffed out like he was making some grand legal stand, and jumped right in. The splash was enormous. The audacity. Even bigger. Grandpa just shook his head. He didn't yell, didn't argue. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and said calmly, Sheriff, you'll want to send a car. Trespasser in my pool. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights lit up our street. Doyle, dripping wet, stood in the driveway trying to argue that he was in the right. But here's the twist. The deputy who stepped out of the cruiser froze when he saw Grandpa. Judge, it's you. That's when Doyle's smug grin collapsed. Turns out, Doyle had picked the wrong yard to mess with. Grandpa wasn't just a veteran. He wasn't just a steady hand with a coffee mug and a rocking chair. He was a retired superior court judge with decades of legal expertise under his belt. The deputy, recognizing him instantly, treated Grandpa with respect. Tan treated Doyle like what he was, a trespasser. Doyle sputtered, waving his arms, trying to twist a law in his favor. But Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He simply laid out the facts: trespassing statutes, property rights, and the HOA's limited authority. Every word landed like a hammer. The deputy turned to Doyle and said flatly, Sir, you're lucky you're walking away with just a warning. Tonight, Linda tried to intervene later, claiming Grandpa was dividing the community. But this time, the neighborhood sided with us. Homeowners signed a petition demanding Doyle step down from his self-appointed patrol. The HOA board, under pressure, finally issued a cease and desist letter barring him from entering anyone's property again. Doyle stopped his patrols. The late-night fence climbing ended, and as for our pool, it remained exactly what it always was, ours. Grandpa never gloated, never bragged. One evening, rocking in his chair, he just said, See, let a fool keep walking. Eventually, the law catches up, and that was the end of Doyle's reign of neighborhood terror.